to the World War II newspaper channel where we read the Chicago Tribune one day at a time, going through World War II as it happened through the eyes of those who lived it. If you enjoy content like this, please subscribe to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notifications when a new upload is going to premiere. And also, if you want to hear the actual newsmakers, go check out my other channel, the companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. There we have vintage broadcasts, including newscasts, speeches, old movies, and music. And subscribe to that channel and click on the bell icon. Now for the newspaper. News as read from the Chicago Tribune for Saturday, January 18th, 1941. Henry Chop reporting. The weather today. The sun rose at 7:14 a.m. It set at 4:47 p.m. For Chicago and vicinity. Clearing on Saturday morning, followed by fair in the afternoon, and on Sunday. Much colder on Saturday, continued cold on Sunday, fresh to occasionally strong west to northwest winds on Saturday. The high temperature, 37 degrees. The low temperature, 29. Today's headline, Need Arms Free. Churchill tells Hopkins won't ask large army from overseas in 1941. London, January 17th. With Harry Hopkins seated at his side, Prime Minister Winston Churchill tonight praised efforts now being made in America to help Britain to victory. He spoke at a meeting of Glasgow City Councillors. He said Britain will not require large armies from overseas in 1941, but will need far more weapons than we shall be able to pay for. The Prime Minister proudly introduced President Roosevelt's special envoy and pointing toward Hopkins as he sat with his face half hidden in his hand and declared, Mr. Hopkins has come in order to put himself in the closest relation with things here. He soon will return to report to his famous chief the impressions he has gathered in our islands. We don't require in 1941 large armies from overseas. What we do require are weapons, ships, and airplanes. All that we can pay for, we will pay for, but we will require far more than we shall be able to pay for. I watch with deep emotion the stirring process by which the democracy of the great American Republic is establishing its laws and its decisions in order to make sure that the British Commonwealth of Nations is able to maintain, as it is at the present time, the front line of civilization and progress. Churchill's speech in Glasgow followed an earlier tour with Hopkins and Mrs. Churchill of the city's defense centers, during which air raid precautions workers paraded at Clydeside. He talked informally to the workers and thanked them for their part in a great crusade. Do not suppose, he said, that we are at the end of the road yet. Though long and hard it may be, I have absolutely no doubt we shall win a complete and decisive victory over the forces of evil. He took up this theme during his night speech also and told his audience that whatever the suffering, we shall not fail mankind at this turning point of its fortunes. My one aim is to extirpate Hitlerism from Europe. He warned, however, that Britain still is a partially armed nation, but declared himself confident of this country's ultimate victory and insisted that if Hitler had found invasion of Britain difficult in July and September, it would not become easier by February, March, or April. He told his audience they could hold no hopes of an easy passage. Before us lies dangers. I hardly like to say as great as those through which we have passed, but at any rate, dangers which, if we neglect anything, will be fatal, mortal. Before us lie many months of having to endure bombardment of our cities and industrial areas without the power to make equal reply. Before us lie sufferings and tribulations. I am not one who pretends that smooth courses are open to us or that our experiences during this year are going to be deprived of terrible characteristics. But what the end will be, I cannot have the slightest doubt, the Prime Minister then declared emphatically. The two dictators are already endeavoring to feed their people with every kind of optimistic tale, but here we have made up our minds. Here we look at facts with unillusioned eyes because we are conscious of the rightness of our cause and because we are determined that whatever the cost, whatever suffering, we will not fail mankind at this turning point in its fortunes. Turning to Hitler's invasion chances, Churchill declared, "That bad man has never had so great a need as he has now to strike Britain from his path. He is master of a great part of Europe. His armies can move almost wherever they will upon the continent. He holds down 8 or 10 countries by force, by secret police, and by still more odious local quislings. But every day this occupation of Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Norway, Denmark, Holland, Belgium, and France, and presently perhaps Italy, lasts, is built up a volume of hatred for the Nazi creed and for the German name, which generations and perhaps centuries hardly will efface. It is for Herr Hitler a matter of supreme consequence to break down the resistance of Great Britain and thus rivet effectively the shackles he has prepared for the people of Europe. But it is one thing to have a need and another to be able to satisfy that need. We are given as our priceless spirit the faith to supply what human judgment cannot outline or know, and that faith will carry us forward through this struggle and at the head of a liberated Europe. It will carry us forward when these countries which I have mentioned, who are now subjugated and trampled down, will bless the British name, and we shall be able to hand onto those in this island who come after us, to our children and grandchildren, a record of duly done which will not have been surpassed in all the rugged annals of our island home. The Prime Minister asserted that British triumphs in the Middle East had succeeded beyond British dreams and gave opportunity to address ourselves to the problems of the perils of 1941 and far greater advantages than were at our disposal 6 or 8 months ago. Washington, D.C., January 17th. Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson and Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox today opposed amending President Roosevelt's dictatorial powers bill to forbid sending American ships convoyed by naval vessels into the European war zones. Testifying before the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Stimson and Knox took the position that the administration's hands should not be tied in any particular. Stimson said conditions might arise which would make it essential in the light of our own defense for our country to send its warships into the war zones. The significance of the administration's position is its implied assumption that the War Powers Bill would give President Roosevelt authority to use the Navy to convoy merchant ships transporting war munitions to Great Britain. The congressional sponsors of the legislation, Senate Majority Leader Alvin W. Barkley of Kentucky and House Majority Leader John W. McCormick of Massachusetts, have denied that the legislation would give Mr. Roosevelt any such power. The non-interventionists, however, have contended that the unlimited scope of the bill would give the president such power and that the first sinking of an American vessel on convoy duty by a German submarine or dive bomber would plunge the United States into war. At today's hearing, Representative Hamilton Fish, Republican, New York, ranking minority member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, released a letter by John Bassett Moore, noted authority on international law, who said the War Powers Bill would transfer the war-making power to the president and establish a totalitarian dictatorship in this country. Dr. Moore, whose writings have been quoted with approbation by Mr. Roosevelt, had been asked to testify on the president's dictator bill, but replied that illness prevented him from doing so. There could be no doubt, he wrote to Fish, that under the guise of certain phraseology, the pending bill assumes to transfer the war-making power from the Congress, in which the Constitution lodges it, to the executive. This is evident upon its face. I have consistently opposed this tendency during the last 8 years, but my voice has not always been heeded, even by those who wish to maintain our neutrality. It is evident that the tide of totalitarianism in government, which has swept over many other lands, has not only reached our shores, but has gone far to destroy constitutional barriers which, once broken down, are not likely to be restored. Stimson advocated the use of American merchant ships convoyed by war vessels to transport war munitions to Great Britain as long ago as June 18, 1940, 2 days before his appointment as Secretary of War. Although Secretary Knox declared today that he did not favor the use of convoys at the present time, he said he would very much oppose any amendment denying the president such power. I am opposed to tying our hands in any particular until we know the conditions under which we've got to act. Knox also said he would oppose the release of any American naval vessels to Great Britain. However, he did not say he favored an amendment forbidding President Roosevelt to sell, give away, or otherwise dispose of any part of the fleet. Would you object to such a proposal or proposition? Asked Representative Fish. No, but the last thing in the world that's humanly conceivable is that the president would give away any part of the Navy, Knox replied. Fish reminded Knox that Mr. Roosevelt exchanged 50 Navy destroyers for air and naval base leases in British Western Hemisphere possessions last summer, and that an attempt to transfer the Navy's Mosquito fleet was blocked by Congress. Knox defended the destroyer deal on the ground that it gave the United States vitally needed bases in the Western Hemisphere. If any of our present naval vessels were given away, would it impair the efficiency of the fleet, Fish asked. Well, it certainly would, Knox responded. You yourself would be opposed to transferring any part of the Navy, Fish continued. The present Navy, I certainly would, Knox declared. With this background, Fish sought to ascertain from Knox how the United States, short of going to war, could give Great Britain any more assistance under the bill than is being given now. He referred to apprehensions expressed by Secretary of State Cordell Hull, Secretary Stimson, and Secretary Knox that Great Britain will confront a supreme crisis within 60 to 90 days. How would this bill, so far as production is concerned, affect that crisis in the next 60 or 90 days, Fish asked. The question of morale is immensely important, Knox said. It wouldn't afford a single ounce of material in the next 60 or 90 days that would not be furnished anyway, would it? Fish inquired. Knox admitted that we are already producing war munitions for Great Britain as rapidly as they can be produced, but expressed the hope that the rate would be accelerated. Knox exploded a major argument made by the administration in support of a provision of the bill which authorizes Mr. Roosevelt to open American ports for the repairing or outfitting of British warships. When the destroyer deal was consummated, Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, solemnly promised that the British fleet would never surrender, but would withdraw to the Western Hemisphere if the waters of the British Isles should become untenable. Secretary Stimson justified the proposed authority to open American Navy yards to belligerent warships on the ground that it would meet such a contingency as the withdrawal of the British fleet to North America. But in his prepared statement, Secretary Knox declared the British Navy can't survive only if the British Isles survive. Should the British Isles fall, we can only believe that the British Navy, which never runs from danger, will fall at the same time. I think we can safely assume that the British Navy will share the fate of the courageous nation that supports it. Secretary Stimson, who began his testimony yesterday and concluded it today, conceded in response to questioning that President Roosevelt would have authority under the bill to lend, lease, or otherwise dispose of any part or all of the defense equipment heretofore or hereafter ordered for the Army and the Navy under the $28 billion three-year program. If he thought that would defend the United States, he might do so, Stimson said. Representative Bartol J. Jonkman, Republican Michigan, asked Stimson whether he thought passage of the bill would be necessary to prevent the defeat of Great Britain. In my opinion, yes, Stimson said. Jonkman then sought to establish that the power proposed to be vested in the president would give him final authority with respect to the conduct of the war against Germany, and that the undertaking to prevent the defeat of Great Britain necessarily would involve the United States in the war. If the president has the power of determining the strategy of distributing these materials, how much shall be kept for the United States and how much shall be sent to England, doesn't have the final authority and control of the conduct of the war. And if that is so, haven't the American people inherited the war? Asked Jonkman. Would it lead inevitably into the war? I do not think so, Stimson replied. The primary objective of the bill is not to prevent the defeat of Great Britain, but to prevent such a disastrous defeat as to deprive us of the protection of the British fleet in the Atlantic. Stimson agreed in response to a question by Representative John M. Voorhees, a Republican Ohio, that the Axis powers have overwhelming superiority and manpower over Great Britain. Is there any way military defeat can be administered to the leader of the Axis powers, meaning Hitler, without more manpower than Great Britain can provide, Voorhees asked. I am willing to admit that the military power of Germany is much greater than the military power of Great Britain, but I'm not willing to admit that a military defeat is the only way of defeating Germany, Stimson said. When asked whether he foresaw the possibility of a collapse in Germany or any other means of defeating her accepting manpower, Stimson said he could not talk freely in an atmosphere like this. But Stimson refused to leave the impression that American manpower might be required to defeat Hitler. I was speaking only of the British Isles, he said. When you speak of the British Empire, you've got a much bigger thing. The British Empire raised 9 million men in the last war. I don't wish to express an opinion on the military power of Great Britain today. It isn't hopeless, far from it, even in infantry power. Those other countries have just got the jump on her. Washington, D.C., January 17th. A propaganda organization reaching into every community in the country, the like of which the Capitol has never seen before, is noiselessly operating to put across President Roosevelt's war dictatorship bill. The biggest cog in this Roosevelt propaganda machine is Wendell Willkie, Republican candidate for president last November, and by that token, the titular leader of the Republican Party. The very fact that he was Mr. Roosevelt's opponent in the election makes his support of the war dictatorship bill one of the most potent influences the president has been able to invoke to obtain public support of the measure. With the way paved for him by the administration, Willkie is about to go to England to survey the war situation. While in London, he is to participate in a joint broadcast with Harry Hopkins, the manager of Mr. Roosevelt's third-term nomination at the Chicago Convention, who is now the president's special emissary to Britain. From England, Willkie will return to tour the United States, speaking in support of the Roosevelt war policy and the British cause. There is a good deal of comment here on the superb stage management of the Roosevelt propaganda, particularly that in which Willkie is the central figure. It is all the appearance of the stage management that was successful on the eve of the Republican National Convention in sidetracking anti-interventionist candidates for the nomination and bringing about the choice of Willkie, who was no less an interventionist than Mr. Roosevelt. The president himself is suspected of being the brains of these manipulations, which are of the same kidney as his introduction into his cabinet of two Republicans who are arch interventionists. Willkie's latest activity in behalf of the Roosevelt war policy was staged last night at the New York Town Hall Forum under circumstances suggesting deft management. Willkie was not on the program. Those in charge announced that Willkie just dropped in to listen and was called on by moderator George Denny for some extemporaneous remarks, ostensibly because the program had been concluded earlier than was expected. That the appearance of Willkie was prearranged and his talk was not extemporaneous was disclosed today by Norman Thomas, socialist leader who was on the program. Thomas said Denny came to him before the meeting and said that Willkie was planning to attend. Denny asked Thomas if he would mind if Willkie were called on to speak. Thomas said he would not mind provided he were allowed time to reply to Willkie. I wouldn't complain over the loss of radio time itself, said Thomas. What I do regret is that I had no chance to reply to a personal and individual attack on me that was uncalled for. It was all right for him to make a stump speech for the president, and I'd like to debate with Mr. Willkie any time. The fact that Wilkie would not sit down was not Denny's fault. He wig-wagged and signaled to Wilkie to quit talking, but Wilkie either did not see or chose not to heed this attempt at remote control. Whatever the preliminary arrangement may have been, and those I do not know, Denny did intend to stop Wilkie about halfway in his speech and tried to do so. In the course of his remarks, Wilkie said, "If I believed that Britain would collapse and America could survive economically, then I would not take a single risk in involving this country in any international entanglement. But if, on the other hand, I believed, as I do believe, that if Britain collapses within a few years, the free way of life will pass from America, then even I, who oppose the election, would give that help to Great Britain." The current issue of the Christian Advocate, official journal of the Methodist Church, carries an open letter to President Roosevelt in the name of millions of people who call themselves Methodists and pleading with him to save their sons from the dissolution of war. We are desperately concerned over what appears to be which appears to some of us to be a steady and relentless drift towards war, the letter states. On every hand, we hear the ominous prophecy, "We will be in by spring," and the terror of the very words benumbs our souls. Our sons, dearer to us than life itself, are already on their way to the training camps by the scores of thousands. Some of us are gravely disturbed over steps that have already been taken. Destroyers have been sold to Great Britain, vast loans are being discussed, and some of us remember the ugly hatreds that have grown up because of other war debts. We do not pretend to know, as you must know them, the inside facts concerning this devastating conflict, nor do we presume to advise you out of our ignorance. But we are putting our trust in this tragic hour, imploring you to turn back the tide. Try again, Mr. President, to bring about a just and honorable peace. Dr. Hugh S. McGill, president of the American Federation of Investors, said last night that certain pertinent questions have arisen in connection with President Roosevelt's War Powers Bill and should be answered before the public will approve passage of the bill by Congress. Among such questions, he said, are these. Number one, is it necessary to give the president such extensive powers in order to extend unlimited aid to Great Britain? Since Congress is now in session ready to meet any emergency, why should the lawmaking body advocate its constitutional responsibilities? And number three, why should Congress unload such enormous, almost incomprehensible powers and responsibilities upon the shoulders of one man? Is it necessary for this nation, Dr. McGill asked, to adopt policies that approach dangerously near to dictatorship in order to protect our free representative democracy from the horrors of dictatorships that imperil the world? And now for world news. Somewhere off the Grecian coast, January 17th, a group of young Italians, their forayed uniforms still soiled with blood from the lost Battle of Clausura, are squeezed in the dark hold of a Greek prison ship near Piraeus. They curse the war, their sickness from bad Albanian water, and their officers who let them be caught in a Greek trap. But they are glad to be alive. 6 hours ago, Italian bombers very nearly killed them all as they huddled in a dugout near the docks during a raid on a small northern Greek port. Flying so high that they were mere silvery specks, the fascist planes dropped more than 300 bombs. Hugging the earth and sweating with the nervousness that even veterans feel when the bombs scream down, some of these young prisoners prayed repeatedly while buildings were smashed into matchwood a few hundred feet away. When the attack paused at dusk, they shuffled aboard the tramp freighter carrying slabs of brown bread, moist white cheese, and oranges the Greeks had given them. For these Alpine troops, among the finest in the Italian armies, this prison ship offered a welcome refuge. Conscripts in the early 20s, reared from childhood under fascism, the Italians arrived in Albania 2 days before Christmas and were thrown immediately against the Greeks in the Clausura sector. Their resistance at the front line was tough, superior to anything heretofore shown by the black shirt companies. Yet the Greek charges broke them. Now on a voyage through the minefields, their war weariness was expressed in a single word: enough. Athens, Greece, January 18th. The Greek High Command early today announced that 1,000 soldiers of Italy's Wolves of Tuscany division had been captured in Albania, and a government spokesman said 2 Italian warships carrying other reinforcements from Italy had been torpedoed in the Adriatic Sea. Italy's famous Lupi di Toscana troops belonged to the 77th Regiment of the newly arrived 7th Division and had been hurriedly sent to Albania to hold up the Greek advance, the Greeks said. Many officers were included in the 1,000 prisoners who, the Greeks said, were captured when Greek troops overwhelmed a fortified Italian position northwest of Klissura. Valona, one of the immediate goals of the Greeks in their northward drive, was bombed heavily again, the spokesman said. The torpedoed Italian warships were identified as the Liguria and the Lombardia. The London Daily Mail attributed to the Athens radio a report that the vessels were troop ships, the Liguria of 15,354 tons and the Lombardia of 20,066 tons. The authoritative naval handbook, Jane's Fighting Ships, lists neither ships. Lloyd's Register lists an Italian Liguria, a commercial vessel of only 174 tons. Aside from this success at sea, the Greeks contended that a third of Italy's forces in Albania had been killed, wounded, captured, or taken home for frostbite treatment, and dispatches from the front reported new but ill-defined gains in Greece's counter-invasion. Newspapers estimated that Italian losses at a total of 70,000. Officially, Italy has acknowledged 12,377 casualties in the war with Greece up to December 31st. The war started October 28th. Frontline dispatches said the Greeks had gained territory both in the Tepelini area and the region north of Klissura. Klissura is in Greek hands, Tepelini in Italian hands. Athens, January 17th. The Anagnos Agricultural School at Konitsa in Epirus, belonging to the Michael Anagnos School Corporation, an institution incorporated under the laws of Massachusetts under the presidency of a prominent Boston banker, Robert H. Gardner, was heavily damaged by Italians during the occupation of Konitsa early in the war, it was reported today. The pillaging, it was said, was done despite protests of the corporation's representative who allegedly told an Italian commander that the school was an American institution. The American flag was said to have been prominently painted on all school buildings. Sofia, Bulgaria, January 17th. A highly reliable informant said tonight that Germany was endeavoring to end the Italian-Greek war by negotiations in Athens. One informant suggested the presence of German troops in Romania was part of a diplomatic argument designed to spur peace negotiations with Greece. In Berlin, authorized sources said there was no change whatever in German relations with Greece, and therefore it could be denied, they said, that German diplomatic activity had been intensified in Athens. Germany has maintained her normal diplomatic mission in Athens throughout the Greek-Italian hostilities. German sources here did not rule out the possibility of armed Nazi intervention in the Greek-Italian war, but declared Germany certainly would welcome a peaceful settlement. It was believed by some informants here that Germany, in attempting to negotiate peace, would endorse proposals that Greece reasonably could accept even if they gave Italy a poor return for her war efforts. There have been some reports that the negotiations were in part being carried on in Sofia following a series of visits to the Foreign Office here the last 3 days by German, Greek, Yugoslav, and Soviet ministers. But Bulgarian official sources said that this was not so, and that presumably the diplomats had called seeking information on Bulgaria's position. German troops probably would go through Bulgaria to reach Greece. Cairo, Egypt, January 17th. A new and heavy British aerial attack which left fires and explosions erupting in the Axis airdrome at Catania, Sicily, the nest from which German dive bombers have been harrying the British Mediterranean fleet, was reported today by the Royal Air Force. This assault One more in a continuing series in which the British claim that some 40 aircraft already had been destroyed at Catania was declared to have left several more Axis planes ablaze on the ground. Others were reported to have exploded. The base itself was said to have been heavily damaged, a hangar left covered by a sheet of flame visible 50 miles away, and the administration building set afire. The raid was carried out through late Wednesday night and yesterday morning. The British said they had no losses. It is from Catania that the Germans have been springing out against British shipping, and that the British Navy, one of their heaviest thrusts, having been a long and violent dive bombing attack yesterday on the British naval base of Malta. Against this assault, the British claimed a successful defense during which 10 of the attacking planes were shot down. A communique by the RAF called it a very heavy raid and declared that while there was no damage to RAF property, civilian property suffered considerably. The communique made no mention of German and Italian claims that in the raid the aircraft carrier Illustrious had been hit again at Malta, that a British merchant ship was hit squarely, and that a British arsenal was bombed. The Italians also asserted that a British cruiser was seriously damaged. Cairo, Egypt, January 17th. The RAF has bombed Italian military barracks at Derna, 100 miles west of besieged Tobruk in Libya, and continued patrol activity in support of the British offensive into Libya, the British command reported today. Rome, January 17th. Normal artillery activity in the Galabat zone of East Africa and artillery and patrol activity in Libya were reported by the Italian High Command today. Rome, January 17th. The Tirana, Albania newspaper Tomori said today that many among the thousands of Italian laborers working with fascist troops confronting the Greeks had been killed or wounded in bombardments. At the Yugoslav-Albanian frontier, January 17th. Bitter hand-to-hand fighting in the central sector between Tepelini and Klissura was reported today, with both the Greeks and Italians concentrating troops on that front. Some military experts believe a decisive battle soon will take place there. London, January 18th. British airmen gave their attention to German bases in occupied France during the daylight hours yesterday following their 41st night raid on the German naval base of Wilhelmshaven in weather described as more suitable to a polar expedition than bombers. RAF squadrons nosed into a channel mist and headed for France. Thereafter, explosions could be heard along the Kentish coast, but whether they were from British guns hammering objectives across the channel or bombs could not be determined. At home, firemen in Bristol stamped out embers left by Thursday night's shower of incendiaries from German raiders. 100 fires, some of which the British acknowledged were serious, were started in that western coastal city, but authorities reported at least 60 were extinguished within 10 minutes. Pilots were returning from the Wilhelmshaven foray, termed highly successful, though lighter than the previous night's assault, declared they flew through ghastly storms. The British acknowledged the loss of 5 planes during the continental operations. They extended also to the German port of Emden, Ostend in Belgium, and Calais and Boulogne in occupied France. German raiders swooped in on London shortly after midnight for an assault that lasted about 3 hours. The attack came after earlier raiders concentrated on South Wales and a town in Devon where a small number of persons were killed by bombs. This foray was met by the heaviest anti-aircraft fire ever reported in the district, or from the district. Berlin, January 17th. A few British planes scattered bombs over northwestern Germany early last evening, slightly damaging a number of buildings, the official German news agency DNB reported today. The news agency said incendiary bombs had started a fire in a school in an unidentified city, but declared there were no civilian casualties. Authorized sources reported the sinking of the 10,000-ton freighter Brisbane by a German surface craft, but gave no details. Lloyd's Register of Shipping lists no Brisbane, but does list the 12,791-ton Brisbane Star, a British vessel. London, January 17th. An authoritative source said today that Britain was seeking the United States' views on the establishment of a British contraband control base in the Western Hemisphere, possibly in the West Indies. There was nothing to stop the British from establishing such a control base in the West Indies, this source added. But he said that because of close relations between Britain and the United States, the British were seeking Washington's views. If a control station were set up in the West Indies, the mostly likely port would be Trinidad, he said. The base would be designed to halt trade between the Americas and Germany in goods the British class as contraband, it was said. There now is reported to be a leakage through the British blockade of cotton, grain, and oil plant machinery, which is shipped through the Panama Canal to the Pacific, thence to the Russian port of Vladivostok, and from there to Germany via the Trans-Siberian Railroad. The British estimate that the Trans-Siberian can carry 500,000 tons of war goods a month for Germany. Dublin, Ireland, January 17th. 9 ships of Irish registry and flying the Irish flag have been sunk off Ireland during the war, Minister of Supplies Sean Lemmas asserted today in a parliamentary debate on Ireland's supply needs. The disclosure came after John McEntee, Minister for Industry and Commerce, said Ireland would be compelled to rely on her own resources for shipping. Britain, he said, was helpful in supplying shipping in the early stage of the war, but now is in a changed situation. Most incoming cargoes are brought on neutral ships chartered by Irish agencies, McEntee said. The Government Information Bureau announced the British Agriculture Department had barred importation into Britain of cattle, pigs, sheep, and goats from Ireland, Northern Ireland, and the Isle of Man because of an outbreak of the hoof and mouth disease in County Derry. Berlin, January 17th. The official German news agency DNB said today that the British battleship Malaya had reached Gibraltar, showing extensive damage from an attack by a British flotilla made January 10th by German and Italian planes. The agency asserted that the British had tried to conceal the identity of the 31,100-ton vessel and to hide traces of damage. Previously, the British acknowledged hits on the 23,000-ton aircraft carrier Illustrious upon the cruiser Southampton, later lost, and upon a destroyer in the January 10th engagement. Berlin, January 17th. Informed Germans tonight said the Reich was using a new all-weather bomber for sinking British ships far at sea. The plane has 4 motors and a wide cruising range, plus a heavy bomb load and numerous machine gun and cannon, the sources said. It carries a crew of 6. It recently sank numerous British ships far out in the Atlantic, they said. A new plane is called the Focke-Wulf Courier, developed from the FW-200 Condor, a commercial plane which made flights to New York and Tokyo. The de-icing system on the new craft, informed persons said, enables the carrying out of attacks under all weather conditions. Saigon, French Indochina, January 17th. Units of the French Asiatic Squadron today were reported to have virtually wiped out a 3-ship Thai flotilla, while the jungles of western Cambodia yielded a story of how nearly 600 invading cavalrymen from Thailand perished in a machine gun trap. The French, however, acknowledged they were withdrawing to the Little Maginot Line, shielding Sisophon, western Cambodia railhead some 50 miles inside the Indochina frontier. Dispatches from Bangkok quoted the Thai radio as announcing an offensive stretching over almost the whole 1,000-mile frontier between the two countries, from Luang Prabang on the north and Sisophon and Battambang on the south. Several Indochina districts were said to have been liberated by the Thai invaders. Thailand claims territory from the French in Indochina. In the naval engagement, the French reported that several of their warships, probably destroyers, came upon 3 Thai craft firing at a French patrol plane in the Gulf of Siam, attacked them, sank 2, and severely damaged the 3rd. The size or classification of the ships was not given. Thailand's fleet includes 4 cruisers and 14 destroyers. An American oil man, the representative of the Texas company, told of the death trap set on January 10th by French foreign legionnaires on a road hemmed in by jungle and from which only 3 Thai troopers out of a whole column escaped death. The French placed machine guns along the road hidden in the dense foliage and opened fire when the column was 500 yards away. The inexperienced troopers were cut down in 15 minutes. French planes were said to have started large fires on 3 principal Thai airports, Aranya, Wadhana, and Prachinburi. San Pedro, California, January 17th. A skipper's story of the seizure in Asiatic waters of his benzene-laden tanker by a German auxiliary cruiser was told today by Captain Leif Krogh. Arriving with 5 members of his crew, the former skipper of the Norwegian tanker Ole Jacobs said he was en route from Singapore to Colombo the night of November 10th when the Nazis signaled us to heave to. He said he was a British warship and wanted to inspect us. Not until Nazi officers and a prize crew came alongside did we know we were in the hands of the Germans. I quickly saw it would be useless to give battle because the raider could have blasted us out of the water. Leaving myself and 2 of my officers aboard the Ole Jacobs, the Nazis took the rest of my crew to the raider and escorted the Ole Jacobs to Kobe, Japan. The captured Norwegians were put ashore at Kobe. Captain Krogh said, and the German prize crew sailed the tanker to sea, evidently to act as a fuel ship for other Nazi raiders. Tokyo, Japan, January 18th. The influential newspaper Nichi Nichi today called for Japanese action to rescue the natives of Indochina from French rule and expressed growing Japanese impatience over the slow course of negotiations for an economic pact with Indochina. Inseparable relations exist between the Greater East Asia sphere of co-prosperity and the release from oppression of races living in southern Asia, declared Nichi Nichi. This principle applies to Indochina, where 23 million natives are ruled by 30,000 Frenchmen. Boston, Massachusetts, January 17th. An implied pledge of Australian cooperation in event of American involvement in war in the Pacific came tonight from Richard G. Casey, Australian Minister to the United States. No one can tell what turn this war will take as time goes on, Casey said in an address before the Society of the Sons of the American Revolution. But I can assure you, he continued, that Australia is ready and able to play its part in any extended field of operations if by evil chance this should come about. And I venture to believe that it is not a matter of indifference to you that there exists diametrically across the Pacific from you a large area peopled by a robust and friendly race with substantial forces of trained men and the means and ability to provide most of their own munitions and weapons. And more important, perhaps, than material weapons is the spirit with which we enter a struggle against the forces of evil. Casey, who has participated in extended Anglo-American diplomatic conversations in Washington on defense problems in the Pacific, especially since Japan joined Germany and Italy in the Tri-Power Alliance, compared the United States and British Empire in an earlier speech today with 2 blades of a pair of scissors. They must work together to do the job. In a luncheon address before the Boston Chamber of Commerce, Casey asserted the continued existence of the British Empire and the United States is so essential to each other as to constitute a compelling case for cooperation, each in his own sphere. Madrid, Spain, January 17th. Britain has signed an agreement with Spain to provide a considerable quantity of Canadian wheat to help carry Spain over to the next harvest, it was learned here today. The amount was not disclosed. The wheat, it was said, is stored in the United States. Chongqing, China, January 17th. The National Military Council tonight announced the Communist new Fourth Army as a unit has been abolished and disarmed for its defiance of military orders and a plot to stage a revolt. The commander, Ye Ting, was arrested and held for court-martial. The council spokesman said the action was strictly a question of military discipline. He said the army refused to move into designated areas as ordered and instead attacked other Chinese units seeking to waylay the government's 40th Division. The 40th, however, fought in self-defense and succeeded in disarming the new 4th by January 12th, he said. Bern, Switzerland, January 17th. Edouard Herriot, former premier, former president of the Chamber of Deputies, and elder statesman of Republican France, was received today by Chief of State Pétain, according to authoritative reports from Vichy. It was believed the meeting was a prelude to formation of a consultative assembly in which Herriot may be given a seat. Foreign Minister Pierre-Etienne Flandin received Paul Faure, a pre-war head of the minority wing of Leon Blum's Socialist Party, along with two other socialist former deputies, René Brunet and Jean Barthélemy. Admiral Jean Darlan, French naval minister, was reported to have left Vichy, and it was believed he had gone to the occupied zone to consult German authorities. Bern, Switzerland, January 17th. Reports reaching diplomatic quarters from Axis and Balkan capitals tonight indicating a meeting between Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini was quite likely this weekend. There was no indication of exactly when or where the meeting might take place, but it was believed such a conference mainly would be concerned with means of giving additional Nazi aid to Italy in the fascist campaign against Greece and Albania and the British in North Africa. Rome, January 17th. Premier Mussolini's scheduled personal appearance Sunday to award prizes to Italian farmers in the country's campaign for self-sufficiency in wheat growing has been canceled, it was learned tonight. Sydney, Australia, January 17th. Relations between Australia and Japan Minister of External Affairs Sir Frederick Stewart declared today remain cordial despite unavoidable trade and financial restrictions caused by the war. Cairo, Egypt, January 17th. The Japanese legation in Egypt today asked the foreign minister for permission to send a military attaché, pointing out that the United States has military, air, and naval observers here. Tokyo, January 18th. The gravity of Japanese-American relations was expected to be the key topic of a secret session of the Diet Tuesday, as today's press still raged against American Secretary of State Cordell Hull's testimony before the House Foreign Affairs Committee. The newspaper Yomiuri said the Japanese government had decided definitely to ignore the declaration in which Hull asserted that danger to the United States would be multiplied manyfold if the Axis military allies Japan, Germany, and Italy gained control of the seas. Other papers called the statement a barefaced lie and outrageous utterance, and there were accusations that the United States sought to control the East Indies, Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore. There were indications that high officials had debated most of yesterday whether to make an immediate reply to Hull. Other probable subjects to be taken up at next week's secret sessions of the Diet are the elapsed fisheries pact with Russia, the status of the China affair, and the progress of trade negotiations with French Indochina. High military and cabinet officials met with Premier Prince Ferdinando Canoy yesterday for the third time this week. Foreign observers expressed a belief that the almost unprecedented series of conferences indicated closer collaboration between the cabinet and army and navy chieftains. Tokyo, Japan, January 18th. Admiral Kichisaburo Nomura, who lost an eye in a bombing in Shanghai in 1932, stocked up on spare glass eyes today prior to his departure Thursday for his new post as ambassador to Washington. I have a hunch my stay in the United States will be a long one, so I thought I'd take 4 or 5 extra eyes to see me through the years, the newspaper Asahi quoted him. Suppose I got an eye broken, it wouldn't do to have a blue one put in by mistake. In more serious vein, he said he advocated no stiff diplomacy, but no favor courting, just a straightforward, sincere effort to do good. Ankara, Turkey, January 17th. President İsmet İnönü and Foreign Minister Şükrü Saracoğlu today received British Ambassador Sir Hugh Knatchbull Hugeson and officers of the British Middle East Command who are in Ankara for conversations with the Turkish High Command. The British officers, among whom are Admiral Sir Howard Kelly, Lieutenant General Sir Marshall Cornwall, and Air Vice Marshal T.W. Elmhurst, have been here 2 days reviewing the military situation with Turkish officers. Rome, January 17th. United States Ambassador William Phillips called on Foreign Minister Concalazio Ciano today in what was described as a courtesy visit customarily paid by ambassadors returning from leave in their home countries. Santiago, Chile, January 17th. The signing of a pact today by the Radicals, Democrats, and Radical Socialists to uphold democratic and Republican ideals and work together in order to maintain popular unity ended weeks of hectic activities in which Chile's Popular Front was severely shaken. As a result of the pact, which does not include the communists, the leftist combination appears more inclined toward the center, with the radicals gaining in importance. Panama City, Panama, January 17th. National mourning was decreed for the state funeral today of General Nicanor A. de Abreu, who died here yesterday. President Arnulfo Arias led the official mourner since General de Abreu was a founder of the Republic and a leader in the movement to win independence from Colombia. Born in Brooklyn, New York, 67 years ago, General de Abreu was educated in the United States. Belgrade, Yugoslavia, January 17th. Southeastern Europe, already forced to eat stale black bread and pay exorbitant prices for essential foodstuffs, now is facing new shortages because officials say so many rail lines have been commandeered for Nazi troop movements and Italian and German shipments of war materials. Dispatches from Hungary and Romania say that in many towns where ordinary supplies have been cut off by German use of railroads, the inhabitants have appealed for commodities by truck to prevent rioting and famine. Similarly, Italian demands for quick delivery of vast quantities of Romanian oil to bolster her dwindling supplies are said to have jammed Yugoslav railways as far as Trieste, causing a serious curtailment of food shipments. The Hungarian food problem is reflected in a new government order halving the amount of food each householder has been allowed to keep on hand: 50 pounds of flour, 4 pounds of dried vegetables, 6 pounds of fats. Romanian reaction to skyrocketing prices was said to have brought several public demonstrations, including one in a Bucharest public market in which one person was killed and several others injured. Nearly all southeastern European governments have restricted bread sales to black loaves 2 and 3 days old. Romanian officials found flour consumption was cut drastically by this order and told the people discovered they could make the bread more palatable by toasting. Now a new order forbids serving of toast in restaurants, dining cars, and other public eating places. Iron Guard squads are said to be raiding homes in many parts of Romania, seizing what they consider to be more than normal supplies of food and selling them in public markets. Even the commissar of the German Expeditionary Force in Romania is finding difficulty in getting enough food for his several 100,000 soldiers. One Bucharest report said the Germans face the necessity of importing 60% of the food needed by their troops in a country from which they had expected to obtain vast food exports. Already long lines of Danish freight cars are arriving in Romania bringing dairy products for the Nazi army. Ration cards have appeared in several large Yugoslav cities. Many city housewives, unable to buy lard, scour the countryside looking for peasants who will sell fats. In Romania, eggs, which a few months ago sold at less than 5 cents a dozen, now bring more than 50 cents in egg speakeasies. Bulgaria's native cheese, one of the principal foods, can be had only with ration cards. Rome, January 17th. The government announced a decree today authorizing railroads to restrict and speed up freight traffic to meet wartime demands on railroads. One benefit was expected to be a solution to freight traffic jams, which some observers consider responsible for temporary shortages of such necessities as food and fuel in some cities. An official announcement said the new rules were less drastic than regulations already in force in some other countries or those applied in Italy during the World War. London, January 17th. The first mass action to halt labor stoppages which have retarded production was taken in a Doncaster court today when 196 miners were summoned for participation in lightning strikes. The summonses were taken out by collieries which claimed damages from the men for a breach of contract under the government emergency regulations outlawing strikes. The court fined 17 minors £3 each, about $12. 18 others were ordered to pay the court costs. In 54 cases, it stated damages were agreed upon out of court. Hearings on the remaining summonses were adjourned on prospects of similar settlements. London, January 17th. Health Minister Malcolm McDonald today broadcast an appeal for more nurses, declaring we shall want fever fighters as well as firefighters in the next few months. He said there was a definite shortage of nurses. Berlin, January 17th. The new rapidly expanding Hermann Göring Iron Works has been divided into 3 groups for administrative purposes, it was made known tonight. Mines and foundries form one group capitalized at 560 million Reichsmarks, nominally $224 million. Munitions and machinery factories in another, capitalized at 80 million marks, and canals and ships in the third group, capitalized at 12,500,000 marks. Most of the properties are in Austria. Berlin, January 17th. A military spokesman at the propaganda ministry today explained why, according to German belief, the organization of the German aircraft industry is superior to that of the United States and Great Britain. His reasons follow. Number 1, state control and complete standardization of all aircraft factories in Germany. Number 2, the existence of their own repair shops and airplane plants in Germany. Number 3, the exploitation of Germany of airplane factories in occupied territories. And number 4, wide-scale training of young engineers and technicians and the large funds Reichsmarshal Hermann Wilhelm Göring allotted for aeronautical research. The spokesman declared that the standardization of the German airplane industry made it possible to place a contract for any type of plane at every one of the numerous German airplane plants. The Junkers Works, he said, can turn out a Messerschmitt fighter or pursuit ship, and the Messerschmitt Works can build Junkers dive bombers. The spokesman declared that this system enables Germany to employ mass production methods unrivaled in any other country. The spokesman said that every German airplane plant has its own repair shop, which he claimed was not the case in America and Britain. In addition, German Air Force units have their own repair shops. Only if the damage to an airplane exceeds 25% is it sent back to the factory. Lesser damage is repaired by the Air Force unit itself. At the beginning of the war, 3 times as many men were employed in the German aircraft industry as in English plane factories, the spokesman asserted. Berlin, January 17th. The severity with which German courts are meting out sentences for crimes against the community was exemplified in a case reported by the press here today. Paul Mathis, 40 years old, was sentenced to death for selling coal stolen from freight yards. Mathis deserved the death sentence, the prosecutor declared, and a special court agreed because the coal was stolen at the beginning of the winter, thus committing a crime against the community. Several colleagues who were judged less involved than Mathis were sentenced to prison. Last week, a man in Dresden was sentenced to death for forging food cards, thus similarly injuring the welfare of the community. Belgrade, Yugoslavia, January 17th. Sabotage of Romanian oil shipments to Germany and Italy on Yugoslav state railways has been going on nearly 90 days, and 3 Yugoslav railway employees are under arrest as a result of it, according to information from the Slovene sources today. According to reliable information, the 3 prisoners were acting for a sabotage ring which provided an ingenious chemical compound with a rubber base which was dropped into railroad tank cars. This compound, it is understood, when burned in combustion engines, clogs the engine valves, in most cases renders them useless. Sabotaged oil shipments are reported to have ruined many German and Italian motors before investigators discovered the source of the trouble. Thereafter, it was necessary to refine all shipments again at considerable delay and expense in Germany and Italy. Tokyo, Japan, January 17th. 9 reactionaries will be tried on charges of attempting to assassinate a certain important statesman close to the throne last July. It was disclosed today with the lifting of an official press ban. Ban, not a band. The would-be assassins, according to Domai, Japanese news agency, plan to ambush the official and dynamite his automobile as he was en route to his office. The plot was said to have failed when they were unable to locate his car. A second attempt on the life of the statesman, who was not identified, was foiled by police, Domai said. The agency quoted police as saying the prisoners believed Japan would be at a disadvantage were a British-Japanese conference on the Tientsin River blockade held at Tokyo, and sought to force transfer of the parley to Tientsin by assassinating one of the emperor's advisors. Shanghai, January 17th. Getting a shave in Shanghai is no easy matter. 6,000 barbers remained out on strike in the city today. An estimated 4,000 workers in various other industries, including garbage collectors in the French concession, were affected by other walkouts. London, January 17th. Mrs. Patrick Campbell, the famous actress, directed in her will made public today that love letters written to her by George Bernard Shaw be published if the author's permission were obtained. But Shaw tonight ruled the world must wait. Asserting that 46 years ago everybody wrote love letters to Mrs. Campbell, Shaw declared, they must wait until the old gentleman who wrote them can no longer make them ridiculous by their white hairs. Mrs. Campbell's will suggested the letters be published so that all who read them will realize that the friendship was an amity amorous, or a tender friendship. Mrs. Campbell, the original Eliza in Shaw's play Pygmalion, was 75 when she died in France last April. And now for national news. Washington, D.C., January 17th. Representatives of the aircraft industry and government officials were appointed today to advise the Defense Priorities Board on the division of restricted commercial aircraft production among airlines. The group is headed by Arthur B. Whiteside, president of the Dun & Bradstreet, New York. Other members are Colonel John H. Jewett, president of the Aeronautical Chamber of Commerce, Colonel Donald H. Connolly of the Civil Aeronautics Board, C.R. Smith, aeronautical consultant of the Defense Commission, Captain D.C. Ramsey of the Navy, Colonel E.L. Lyons of the Army. Washington, D.C., January 17th. Maximum aluminum requirements for the Army and civilian purposes will reach their peak under the present program next December, but if developments result in still larger military demand, the need for greater ingot capacity will have to be met by some reduction in civilian consumption. This is the essence of a report now in the hands of Edward R. Stettinius, Jr., Chief of the Industrial Materials Division of the National Defense Advisory Commission. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Mines forecast today that domestic aluminum production would reach a peak rate of 825 million pounds annually by July 1942. By July 1941, it said the annual production rate would likely be stepped up to 690 million pounds. The defense report states, in effect, that if the new military program goes beyond the formulated last October, or if the number of heavier planes ordered is larger than already scheduled, civilian use of aluminum will have to be restricted. This does not mean, it was explained, that all civilian use of aluminum would be halted. It will probably mean that while pots and pans will continue to be made, large consumers such as makers of interstate buses with heavy aluminum parts may have to curtail operations. The industry would be able to meet the need for additional ingot capacity, it was indicated, by temporary curtailment of some civilian objects and by additional fabricating capacity, provided it has sufficient notice of the higher peak requirements. The latest aluminum figures were completed recently after a visit to the West Coast airplane plants by Army, Navy, and Procurement Division officers inquiring into reports of an aluminum shortage. Illustrating the rapid increase of aluminum production, the report pointed out that in June 1940, the industry produced 35 million pounds compared to an estimated 51,600,000 pounds in January 1941. 64,500,000 pounds in July 1941 and 76 million pounds in July 1942. These figures, however, were said to include some imports of refined metal. Civilian requirements estimated at 47,200,000 pounds in January 1941 will rise to 61 million pounds in July 1942, the report said. Total military requirements for January 1942 were estimated at less than half of the civilian requirements. In making estimates of aluminum requirements, the staff that made the study assumed that the aluminum should be delivered to the airplane companies 4 months in advance of delivery schedules for the planes. Washington, D.C., January 17th. Rear Admiral Chester W. Nimitz told the House Naval Committee today that for more than 6 months, the Navy has been training hundreds of reserve midshipmen under a plan originally intended for use after mobilization for war. Nimitz, chief of the Bureau of Navigation, was testifying on a bill to permit members of Congress to appoint an additional midshipman apiece to the Naval Academy in order to increase the supply of officers. The committee unanimously recommended the measure after amending it so that 100 instead of 50 members of the Navy and Marine Corps enlisted reserves could be appointed to the Academy each year. Nimitz said that under the Reserve Midshipman Training Plan, the Navy would have about 4,500 young officers ready by late summer to fill positions on the fighting ships. A total of 6,649 of those young reservists have had cruise training since June, Nimitz said, and 5,382 of them are going through selected training schools ashore. Honolulu, Hawaii, January 17th. Selective Service officials today said 408 American citizens of Japanese ancestry were among the 700 men now in training at Schofield Barracks. Citizens of other ancestry include 68 Anglo-Saxon, 51 Portuguese, 35 Chinese, 35 Hawaiian, 50 part Hawaiian, 20 Filipino, 18 Puerto Rican, and 6 Korean. Honolulu, Hawaii, January 17th. Rear Admiral Thomas Withers relieved Rear Admiral Wilhelm L. Friedel today as commander of the Scouting Force Submarines United States Fleet. Friedel sailed on the Lurline to become commandant of the Mare Island Navy Yard effective February 24th. Withers had been inspector of ordnance at Newport, Rhode Island. Washington, D.C., January 17th. The War Department said today condemnation proceedings were being started to acquire 74 acres owned by Oakland, California, to provide for expansion of the Army's San Francisco Port of Embarkation. The site includes part of the Port of Oakland terminal facilities. McCord Field, Washington, January 17th. Air Corps and commercial pilots scanned wilderness areas of the storm-strewn Pacific coast today for an Army bomber missing more than 24 hours with 7 men aboard. The search centered on the Mount St. Helens area of southwestern Washington along the California-Oregon line on reports of a big plane that had been seen in those vicinities, apparently in trouble, a few hours after the B-18 Douglas plane left here for Muroc Range, California. Operations officers said a report that the plane had been found wrecked in Yreka, California, could not be confirmed. The bomber, with First Lieutenant R.M. Krumez, pilot, and Second Lieutenant C.T. Nielsen, co-pilot in charge, left yesterday for the bombing range in Southern California. Others aboard were Second Lieutenant J.F. Geese, navigator, First Lieutenant L.E. McKay, Sergeants L.H. Needling and P.L. Maz, and Technical Sergeant H.A. Davis, a passenger. New York, January 17th. To increase the carrying capacity of the Yankee, Dixie, and Atlantic Clippers by 4,000 pounds each, the Pan American Airways has stripped these giant flying boats of the transatlantic service of 1,700 pounds of their expensive furnishings, stepped up the horsepower of their engines, and increased their fuel capacity. So great have been the European mail loads recently that the line has found difficulty in carrying both passengers and mail. All but 5 of the ship's 30 berths have been removed, as was every frill not deemed necessary to flight. Even the glistening coats of aluminum paint have been scraped off, making the ship 93.5 pounds lighter in that respect. New York, January 17th. Joseph P. Kennedy, former ambassador to Great Britain, will speak over the national broadcasting company Red Network from 6 to 6:30 p.m. Chicago time tomorrow. And announcing in Washington that he would make the broadcast, Kennedy said the accent will be on keeping this country out of war. San Francisco, California, January 17th. A deportation hearing against Princess Stephanie Hohenlohe was transferred to her Palo Alto apartment today after the Hungarian princess rode to the immigration offices here in an ambulance. A transcript of the proceedings will be sent to Washington. The princess is free on $25,000 bond. The princess waited on the ambulance stretcher outside the immigration building for 10 minutes while her attorneys conferred with officials. Immigration officers then announced that because of her illness, the session would be held at her bedside. The ambulance headed back to Palo Alto. The hearing was ordered after she failed to comply with a Department of Justice order to leave the country by January 11th. The government announced her continued presence here was considered inimical to the nation's best interest. Her attorney, Joseph Bullock, who protested that the Hungarian princess was not pro-Nazi, unsuccessfully sought a postponement of the hearing because of her nervous condition. New York, January 17th. Workers in the 45-story transportation building got some unexpected mountain climbing training today. There was no alternative to using the stairs when the skyscraper's 14 elevators were stopped by a strike of girl operators seeking higher wages. Some employees stranded while at lunch were told to take the day off, but Eleanor Tracy, 19 years old, a receptionist, telephoned her boss that the elevators were not running and offered to carry some lunch up 31 floors to him. Her offer was accepted. 25 employees of an insurance company on the 20th floor drew lots to determine which two would have to walk down and get lunch for the entire group. 2 stenographers lost. They had to do plenty of climbing, but the lunches were hauled up the outside of the building with a cord dropped from a window. New York, January 17th. Joseph Sachs Lanza, alleged racketeering czar of New York's Fulton Fish Market until recently, was indicted by a grand jury today on 6 counts of extortion and 1 of conspiracy to extort money from Local 202 of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, AFL. District Attorney Thomas E. Dewey described Lanza at the time of his arrest, January 8th, as being so powerful that he continued to extract $120 a week from the union during 2 years he served in a federal prison for violation of antitrust laws in a fish market racket. On his release in 1939, he resumed his post as business agent of the Seafood Handlers Union, finally being forced by high AFL authorities to resign. The conspiracy charge specifies that Lanza and 2 henchmen sent waterfront guerrillas and other strong-armed men to squeeze money out of Local 202 by coercion, assault, and gunplay. The extortion is said to have extended from December 1937 until recently. Indicted with Lanza were James Carlo, 52 years old, who said he published a produce market sheet, and Nicholas J. Di Stefano, 34, Secretary-Treasurer of Local 202. As the 3 were arraigned and pleaded not guilty late today before General Sessions Judge Jonah J. Goldstein, Dewey revealed that several others have been indicted in connection with the Lanza case. The names were not disclosed. The interesting thing about this indictment is the extremes to which big-time gangsters go these days for comparatively small pickings, Dewey commented. Organized crime is obtaining small money in New York County these days. Washington, D.C., January 17th. A declaration that a radio station cannot be an advocate but must present all sides of important public questions fairly, objectively, and without bias came today from the Federal Communications Commission. It reprimanded station WAAB of Boston for past practices but renewed its license because it said John Shepard, the 3rd president of the Yankee Network Incorporated, the licensee, had pledged not to color or editorialize news in the future. Beginning early in 1937 and continuing through September 1938, the commission said it was the policy of station WAAB to broadcast so-called editorials from time to time, urging the election of various candidates for political office or supporting one side or another in various questions of public controversy. In these editorials, the commission asserted no pretense was made at objective, impartial reporting. Declaring the station revealed a serious misconception of its duties and functions under the law, the commission said Radio can serve as an instrument of democracy only when devoted to the communication of information and the exchange of ideas fairly and objectively presented. A truly free radio cannot be used to advocate the causes of the licensee. It cannot be used to support the candidates of his friends. It cannot be devoted to the support of principles he happens to regard most favorably. In brief, the broadcaster cannot be an advocate. The public interest, not the private, is paramount. In renewing WAAB's license, the Commission said it was relying upon comprehensive and unequivocal representations as to the future conduct of the station. It added, should any future occasion arise to examine into the conduct of this licensee, however, the Commission will consider the facts developed in this record and its review of the activities as a whole. The Commission denied the application by the Mayflower Broadcasting Corporation, which sought authority to replace WAAB on the air. The Communications Act provides that the Commission, before licensing a broadcast station, must find that public interest, convenience, and necessity will be served. In its recent annual report, the Commission said it had the duty of determining whether the past conduct of stations has been consistent with their obligations under the law. Broadcast stations are licensed for a 1-year period, although the Communications Act authorizes a maximum of 3 years. Officials said the Commission used the 1-year period instead of the maximum in order to keep a better check on radio operations. Washington, D.C., January 17th. A new highway post office service calling for use of huge bus-type trucks equipped with the same facilities for sorting, handling, and dispatching mail as are railway postal cars was announced tonight by Postmaster General Frank C. Walker. Walker called the new service one of the most significant developments in the field of mail transportation in recent years. He said it would not compete with railway mail service, but was designed to supersede discontinued train service or supplement inadequate service. The first route to be known officially as the Washington, D.C. and Harrisburg, Virginia Highway Post Office will be inaugurated on February 10th. Walker said 2 other routes had been selected but would not be announced until delivery of the trucks to be used on them. Kansas City, Missouri, January 17th. Vera Hruba, 20-year-old Czechoslovakian ice skating star appearing with a review here, fears her visitor's permit, which expires March 1st, may not be renewed. Ms. Hruba said that rather than face deportation to Germany, she would marry an American citizen if fortunate enough to find one who would be kind. Otherwise, she said she will try to enter Chile. Hollywood, California, January 17th. Actress Olivia de Havilland underwent an appendectomy today. Dr. Vern Mason said he expected a rapid recovery. And now for local and regional news. The Chicago chapters of the America First Committee and the Citizens Keep America Out of War Committee reported last night that they have obtained a total of more than 300,000 signatures protesting the Roosevelt administration's war policy and the president's war powers bill. Already a flood of petitions have been sent out by the America First group to Illinois congressmen in Washington, D.C. as a reflection of the sentiment of their constituencies. Ms. Janet Ayer Fairbank, vice chairman of the Chicago chapter of the America First Committee, said that 150,000 names already were on the organization's petitions and that 50,000 more are expected. The petitions are being assembled by congressional districts and are to be sent to each district's representative in Congress. To arrange the signatures and petitions by congressional districts, it has been necessary for the Chicago chapter to increase its staff almost threefold. Young women employed in Loop offices quickly solved the problem by volunteering for evening work. At the same time, the committee moved yesterday to larger offices at 122 South Michigan Avenue because of the large number of signatures and responses rolling in. This was done without any let-up in activity. Telephone numbers at the new quarters are the same: Wabash 5473, 5474, 5475, 5476, and 5477. National headquarters of the America First Committee also reported enlargement of its movement with the organization of 15 new chapters yesterday. This represents the largest single day's gain since recruiting began. The committee now has 45 chapters. The new ones, announced by Robert Bliss, Director of Organization, are in the following cities: Denver, Colorado; Akron, Ohio, a junior chapter in Akron; Dayton, Ohio; El Dorado, Arkansas; Cole Center, Pennsylvania; Burlington, Iowa; Sioux Falls, South Dakota; Highland, Wisconsin; Salt Lake City, Utah; Waupun, Wisconsin; Seattle, Washington; Providence, Rhode Island; Davenport, Iowa; and Aurora, Illinois. Washington, D.C., January 17th. Representative George A. Paddock, Republican, Illinois, said today he is receiving about 100 letters a day from residents of the 10th Illinois District strongly opposing the war dictatorship bill. "I shall vote against H.R. 1776, said Paddock, because it gives the president a blank check on foreign policy. The people of the 10th District elected me their congressman to speak for them on foreign policy, and they evidently do not wish me to delegate that power to the president. Mr. Roosevelt already has unprecedented powers with enormous appropriations to carry them out. Whenever national defense requires additional action by Congress, the people's representatives can be relied on to protect the nation's interests." Although War Department officials have not yet approved the site for the airplane engine parts factory to be built in Chicago by the Studebaker Corporation, bids already are being taken on proposed plants at South Bend and Fort Wayne. The two other plants will each have a 400 by 1,000 foot building main unit of steel frame and concrete construction, according to plans by Giffords and Valley Incorporated Detroit architects. There also will be an industrial relations building, a boiler house, oil and gasoline storage building, and other small units covering approximately 16 acres. The Chicago plant, it was said, will occupy a 50-acre site, although much more acreage may be purchased. Men called for military training under the Selective Service Act cannot qualify under present laws for unemployment compensation payments during their term of service, officials of the Illinois Department of Labor said yesterday. Trainees, moreover, may lose their benefit rights acquired before being called through a lapse of time while in camp. Washington, D.C., January 17th. President Roosevelt today ordered the immediate construction of 100 dwelling units at Rantoul, Illinois, as part of a general building program to avert a serious housing shortage for defense workers. Recommended by C.F. Palmer, Defense Housing Coordinator, a total of 1,982 new dwelling units will be built in 8 communities throughout the nation by the Federal Works Agency. This would be in addition to 1,435 units already assigned to the federal agency. Housing projects to be built by other government agencies or by private industry would bring the total to 9,029. The 100 units recommended for Rantoul, Illinois, would house the families of civilian personnel at Chanute Field at rentals of $21 to $45 a month. They would be in addition to 200 units recommended for enlisted personnel at $16 to $20 a month. Also assigned to the Federal Works Agency for construction, and the addition of 100 units for civilian personnel under construction by a local authority with a USHA loan, with rentals fixed at $21 to $45 a month. Vacancies for 212 men in the Medical Administrative Reserve Corps and for 1,955 physicians in the Medical Reserve Corps of the Army were announced yesterday by Brigadier General Charles H. Bonesteel, commander of the 6th Corps area. General Bonesteel said the openings in the Administrative Reserve are for men between the ages of 21 and 35 who have had at least 3 years' experience in such vocations as the administration of medical department units, hospital management, pharmacy work, or maintenance of hospital records and the medical supply accounts. 2 years of college or its equivalent are required. Applicants for the Medical Corps must be graduates of recognized medical schools and within the same age limits. Springfield, Illinois, January 17th. Governor Dwight H. Green today manifested an intention to apply the brakes gently to any of his new cabinet members who, according to his views, threatened to use what might prove to be too vigorous a broom in sweeping out Democratic job holders. The expression of his ideas came as the result of an announcement that George B. McKibben, whose appointment as Director of Finance has bbeen confirmed by the Senate, but who does not take office until next Monday, sent notices of dismissal to about 80 employees in that department today. All 80, it was said, came within Governor Green's category of unnecessary employees. 40 in the sales tax division, 31 in the oil inspection division, and the rest in the gas tax division. All these and more may be put out soon. But the governor said that McKibben had not presented the list to him and that he expected the director to consult with him before the orders were made final. The governor leaves here tomorrow afternoon for Chicago, where he will address the Associated Jewish Charities Sunday evening. He will return to Springfield on Monday, but before leaving Chicago, he said it is probable he will have a talk with McKibben. Green said that his instructions to his incoming directors were that they were to survey the departments and then report to him on the extent to which unnecessary jobs may be eliminated without injuring the service. He said he has not yet received an informal report on this subject from any of them. He was asked if he knew that Martin P. Durkin, Horner appointee who has not been replaced, had said that he received an offer of a position elsewhere. The governor replied that Durkin told him of the offer in a brief talk they had and that he intends to see Durkin again soon, probably next week. Indianapolis, Indiana, January 17th. Governor Henry F. Schricker today reaffirmed his recent verbal dissolution of the Hoosier Democratic 2% Club and said no state employee will be solicited by the Democrats for political contributions. Any voluntary contributions will be made to the Democratic State Committee, receipted and accounted for, he said. Recently, 2 or 3 queries have been made to me about contributions, and I referred them to the state committee office, the governor said. In fact, I made a contribution to the committee myself yesterday and got a receipt for it. We must keep the headquarters open, and no one can expect us to pay the bills out of thin air. There's nothing wrong about that system. The mother who charges that her daughter, 13 years old, was attacked by Hugh Greer Carruthers, ex-priest of the Kumbum Lamasery in Tibet, took the witness stand yesterday at Carruthers' trial on a charge of rape and said that her fear of Carruthers kept her from reporting the attack until long after it had occurred. The case is before a jury in the criminal court of Judge Joseph A. Graber. The state charged that the rape took place on July 30th in the offices of the Neological Foundation, 32 West Randolph Street, which is headed by Carruthers. The defendant was arrested on November 22nd. The mother told the jury, "When I told Carruthers I would expose him, he said, 'I dare you, I'll fix you.'" The final witness for the state was Allie T. Worth, 4710 Kenmore Avenue. Questioned by Assistant State's Attorney Sam Friedman, Worth testified that he had been authorized by Carruthers to pay from $300 to $500 to the girl's aunt if the charge were dropped. Worth was arrested by Oak Park police and turned over to the state's attorney when he went to the aunt's home on January 9th, he testified. Worth added that he had not discussed the case with the aunt. At one time during negotiations, Worth said Carruthers gave him $50 for expense money and an additional $100. On cross-examination, Worth admitted that his arrest had been caused on information given to the state's attorney by defense attorney Cameron Latter. He also testified that Latter had told him to get out of the case and said that he had never received the $300, which was to have been paid to the girl's aunt. The state rested after Worth's testimony, and the defense called as its first witness Herbert Marshall Himes, 1211 North LaSalle Street, who said he is director of extension education for the foundation at a salary of $220 a month. Himes said the girl's mother had told her story to him and asked what Carruthers was going to do about it. He said he referred her to Carruthers. The trial was adjourned until Monday. Carruthers is expected to take the stand in his own defense on Tuesday. Federal alcohol tax agents under the direction of Deputy Supervisor Ralph Herrick in 3 raids yesterday seized 6 men accused as bootleggers. Louis Lavender, 49 years old, 4908 North Drake Avenue, was seized in a house at 4421 South LaSalle Street where a 1,000-gallon still was being operated. The agents followed a delivery truck from the house to a garage at 7519 Exchange Avenue, where they seized Jack Soroka, 44, Harry Siegel, 31, and Milton Gladstone, 47. In the third raid at 6421 Normal Avenue, William York, age 30, and Harry Anderson, 35, were arrested. The agents said they had previously followed a delivery truck loaded with illicit alcohol from the LaSalle Street house to this address. Detroit, Michigan, January 17th. 21 Chicagoans were named in a federal indictment returned today against an international bootleg ring. 14 other persons living in Michigan, Ohio, and Canada were also indicted. The 35 defendants are charged with conspiring to manufacture alcohol illicitly and thus evading the payment of $2,500,000 in Internal Revenue alcohol taxes. According to John C. Leher, United States Attorney, the syndicate manufactured booze in 2 huge Chicago distilleries and smuggled it across the Detroit River into Canada, where a ready market existed because of war-boosted prices. The syndicate sold at dry-era prices in Canada, getting from $35 to $50 for a 5-gallon can of alcohol. Leher named Abe J. Moss of Detroit, a former Prohibition rum runner and smuggler, as the big boss of the huge conspiracy. Chief of the Chicago end, it was said, was Hyman Frank, who formerly lived at the 5100 block in Madison Street there. The government's cleanup of the international ring began last May when revenue agents raided stills at 1539 North Kilpatrick Avenue and 3042 Lawrence Avenue in Chicago. These stills had a combined daily capacity of 2,500 gallons. At that time, officials said the Chicago division of the syndicate operated 3 public garages as blinds for warehouses, ran 9 trucks and 3 passenger cars to serve interstate patrons, and employed a corps of expert purchasing agents to buy supplies. In all, the ring operated a fleet of 36 trucks and passenger cars and 4 boats. The booze was trucked to Detroit and smuggled across the river in the boats at night. The Chicago raid resulted in the indictment of Frank and 13 others last June. Some of them were re-indicted in today's action. The Chicagoans named with Frank today were Nathan Rosen, Bernard Schneiderman, Edward Witt, David Walensky, Jack Eisenberg, Ernest Switzer, Harry Anderson, Walker Matthews, Colored, Louis Malero, Samuel Mendel, described as transporters, John S. Frankel, alleged frontman for the syndicate, Harry Steiner and Robert Abramovitz, named as cookers, Al Burke, Leonard Bloom, and Benny Surt, truck drivers, Clemens J. Tafel and James Wellborn Jr. listed as renters of distillery premises, and David Rothman and Louis Schneiderman, alleged manufacturers. 8 Detroiters, in addition to Boss Moss, including his wife Ann, were named, as well as 3 Canadians and 2 men from Cleveland. The indictment contains 7 counts, each carrying a maximum penalty of 2 years in prison and a fine of $10,000. Ralph Herrick, assistant to E.C. Yellowway, head of the government alcohol tax unit in Chicago, said yesterday that some of the Chicagoans indicted in Detroit, Michigan, were under indictment in Chicago and under bond. They will be rearrested, he said, and search will be made for other defendants. Lieutenant Sidney DeLove, Assistant Provost Marshal at Fort Sheridan, notified Chief of Police John D. Smith of Hollywood yesterday that drivers for the Black and White Cab Company of Highwood will no longer be permitted to enter the military reservation. The action was the outgrowth of the alleged beating of a soldier at the fort on Wednesday. Assault and battery charges were filed in Waukegan, meanwhile, against Roland Stanley, 20 years old, and Peter Murphy, 24, both drivers for the company. They were charged with beating the soldier, Private Leroy Polzin, 22, of Company D, 2nd Infantry, after an argument about a taxi fare. The 2 were held in the Lake County Jail. James Gleason, 26 years old, 8952 South Aberdeen Street, was shot in the abdomen last night by one of 2 companions during an altercation near 48th Street and Ashland Avenue. Gleason, who said he was a laborer, refused to name his assailant, who fled. Gleason is in Southtown Hospital. An unidentified man, about 45 years old, stopped on the east side of the Michigan Avenue Bridge shortly after the lunch hour yesterday, hung his overcoat on the railing, and jumped into the river. Park policeman Michael Mulvihill, stationed nearby, threw a life preserver into the water, but the man, apparently ignoring it, drowned. Coast Guardsmen recovered the body shortly afterwards. Dubuque, Iowa, January 17th. Dubuque County Coroner C.C. Cody said tonight that the body of Mary Mohlman, 19 years old, of Fulton, Illinois, a University of Dubuque co-ed, was found late today hanging from a tree in a pasture just outside the city limits off Highway 20. The coroner said the girl had committed suicide and that she had been dead approximately 24 hours before the body was found. Two notes addressed to girlfriends at the university were found. Two trainmen were injured early yesterday when the Fast Mail, a passenger train pulled by a diesel engine, crashed into an empty freight train on the Alton Railroad near Romeo, a village 8 miles north of Joliet. None of the sleeping passengers was injured. The passenger train was en route to St. Louis. The freight train was backing onto the north tracks to let the passenger train pass. 8 freight cars, including several tankers, were overturned. Several cars on the passenger train were derailed. The 312,000-pound diesel engine hurled a ditch and buried its nose in a cornfield. G.W. Brown of Bloomington, the engineer, was thrown out and injured. The engine caught fire, but one of the 2 firemen seized an extinguisher and put out the blaze. William F. Young, conductor on the freight, who was riding on a side ladder, was seriously injured. L.B. Manning, chairman of Aviation Corporation, one of the country's largest aircraft and engine manufacturing concerns, yesterday joined a group of other Chicago civic leaders who have reopened efforts to obtain a downtown lakefront airport. Manning notified Congressman Charles S. Dewey, Republican of the 9th District near North Side, that he would assist in any way possible. Revival of civic interest in the lakefront airport came Thursday night when Congressman Dewey met with 75 business leaders at a dinner in his honor in the Chicago Athletic Association. Dewey asked the formation of a committee to develop a sound program for construction of the lakefront field. Making a revolutionary step in railroad transportation, a 5,400 horsepower diesel-electric locomotive will be placed in main line freight service next month by one of the transcontinental lines running west from Chicago. Railroad men said the plan announced yesterday by officials of the Santa Fe Railroad will strengthen Chicago's position as the leading center for the construction of diesel-electric engines. Steam locomotive building has been concentrated largely in the east in the past, although Chicago has been a center for both railway, passenger, and freight car building. Development of the diesel-electric locomotive has given Chicago an outstanding industry. The new diesel was built in the LaGrange plant of the Electromotive Corporation. The plant, established in 1935 by the General Motors Corporation, gave Chicago its first big role in the construction of motive power. Continued expansion in the use of diesel-electric power has caused a steady expansion in the plant, which now employs approximately 3,500 persons. This addition to industrial Chicago was created by the demand of railroads for more speed in their passenger service to meet competition from airlines and private automobiles. It was said the introduction of the new locomotive will mark the first time a diesel-electric engine will be used in regular mainline freight service. The diesel has proved its value in hauling streamlined passenger trains and now is said to be offering a real challenge to the steam locomotive, which heretofore has been king of the railway freight service. The new locomotive, which has gone through preliminary tests, consists of 2 units of 2,700 horsepower each. Each unit is powered with 2 16-cylinder 2-cycle engines rated at 1,350 horsepower each. It is said to be capable of hauling 100 loaded freight cars with ease over level track and is geared to a maximum speed of 75 miles an hour. One factor which has held back the development of diesel-electric locomotives for freight service has been their high cost in comparison with the cost of steam locomotives. The original cost of a diesel has been as much as 3 times that of a steam locomotive of comparable power. Manufacturers, however, have succeeded in reducing the cost of diesel construction. One valuable feature of the diesel is that it may be kept in service 24 hours a day for long periods, while steam locomotives must be retired for servicing every few hundred miles. The fact that it is a 24-hour engine permits a reduction in the number of service stops, thus saving time. With the completion of part of the Ida B. Wells Homes, a housing project for colored families at the northeast corner of East Pershing Road and South Parkway, the first 40 tenants will move in today. Built and operated by the Chicago Housing Authority with most of the funds supplied by the United States Housing Authority, the project will accommodate 1,662 families when completed, probably in June. Rentals range from $18 to $23 a month. These include costs and utilities. City officials will be present at the opening ceremonies at 11:30 a.m. today. The first units to be occupied are at 409 to 421 East 27th Street and 500 to 570 East Pershing Road. And in sports, New York, January 17th. Henry Armstrong, the gallant hammering Henry, who won the distinction of being the only fighter ever to hold 3 titles at one time, was stopped by Fritzy Zivic of Pittsburgh in 52 seconds of the 12th round tonight before a crowd of 19,000, which paid $78,242 in Madison Square Garden. Armstrong, who sought to regain the welterweight title, which he lost to Zivic on October 4th, announced his retirement from the ring after the bout. It was Armstrong's first fight since the loss of the championship and the first time he had been unable to finish a bout. "My eyes won't hold up anymore," Armstrong said, "and I'm through. I'm going into the wine business in California." Both his eyes were cut. Referee Arthur Donovan ended the battle after having twice entreated Armstrong to save himself further punishment. After the 10th round, Donovan notified Armstrong he would give him one more round. Armstrong came out after this warning with a flash of his old furious fighting style, trying to demonstrate that, though battered and bruised, cut and bleeding, he still had plenty of fight left in him. Through the 11th round, he pulled the crowd to its feet in a rally that inspired ringside veterans. In this fleeting period, Armstrong hammered Zivic around the ring. He pelted the champion with lefts and rights to the body, plied him with left jabs and right hand smashes to the head and face. Repeatedly, Armstrong grazed Zivic's jaw with desperate rights, which he hoped would turn the tide of defeat. For 2 minutes, Armstrong was Zivic's irrepressible ringmaster. It was spectacular ring work. Then Zivic took control, stepped to the attack, and through the last minute of the round, punched Armstrong repeatedly with short, stinging lefts and rights that ripped old wounds. When the 11th ended, Dr. Williams H. Walker, Boxing Commission physician, climbed into Armstrong's corner to examine Henry's battered features, particularly his cut and swollen eyes. However, Dr. Walker said the fight could go on, and Armstrong started the 12th round much as he had started the 11th, but now he could not repeat the desperate stand. Armstrong shuffled into a barrage of straight lefts, a crisscross fire of lefts and rights, all punishing blows. He tried with a roundhouse right but missed and slipped down. Up he came, charging recklessly, only to be pelted by another shower of Zivic's lefts and rights to the head, face, and jaw. Donovan then stopped the fight. Armstrong came out of Los Angeles in 1936 and fought his way through 3 divisions to the throne of each. He gave up the featherweight title voluntarily and lost the lightweight title crown to Lou Ambers. Scholastic and athletic leaders of the Western Conference acted yesterday to place facilities of Big Ten schools behind the government's National Defense Program. A group of presidents, faculty representatives, athletic directors, and physical education authorities, acting as a joint committee, laid down several recommendations and resolutions adopted at a meeting in the Sherman Hotel. One resolution urged that member schools take such measures as may be necessary and feasible for the accomplishment of national defense aims and to provide the necessary financial means and the necessary adjustment in university programs as to hours, credits, and otherwise so that these ends may be effectively accomplished. Carl Lieb of Iowa, faculty committee chairman, explained that the recommendations were phrased in general terms because each school must work out its own program of cooperation with the government. He pointed out that one change in curriculum being studied would provide credit for students in physical education classes. At present, no credit is given. The Big Ten officials amplified their purpose in joining hands in this project, not only that the young men of our institutions may realize their potential capabilities for immediate defense purpose, but also for the welfare of the nation for all time to come. 22 officials attended the conference, including 4 presidents: A.C. Willard, Illinois; E.C. Elliott, Purdue; Herman Wells, Indiana; and Franklin Bliss Snyder of Northwestern. Athletic directors, meeting separately, voted to move the outdoor track meet in Minneapolis up to May 16th and 17th from May 23rd and 24th, and to set back the golf tournament on the Millrose Farm course from May 26th to 27th to June 18th and 19th. The changes were made to avoid conflict with final exams at certain schools. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, January 17th. DePaul University's basketball team nosed out St. Joseph 52-50 in an overtime game tonight. A crowd of 6,000 saw the visitors tie the score at 44-all in the last 20 seconds on Carter O'Rourke's free throw and win in the extra period on Elmer Gamer's 3 baskets. The teams were tied at 21-21 after a seesaw first half. DePaul went ahead 39-30 in the second half, but the Hawks rallied to go ahead 44-33 before O'Rourke made good his free throw. Notre Dame, Indiana, January 17th. Notre Dame's 12-man basketball squad left for a 2-game Eastern swing today without coach George E. Keogan, who was under physician's orders not to make the trip. Ray J. Meyer, recently appointed assistant, was in charge. Notre Dame will meet Pennsylvania at Philadelphia tomorrow night and Syracuse at Syracuse Monday night. The next home game is with Michigan State, January 25th. Detroit, Michigan, January 17th. An aggressive Chicago Bruins basketball team did everything tonight except make enough free throws and as a result dropped a 45-43 decision to a smaller Detroit Eagles team in a National League game before 2,500. The Eagles connected on 15 of 17 free throws while the Bruins made only 5 of 13 foul shots. The Blackhawks, smarting over the 5-1 defeat dealt them Thursday in Montreal by the Canadiens, arrived home last night. A workout in the stadium was ordered for today by manager Paul Thompson in preparation for the clash with the Boston Bruins tomorrow night. Thompson plans to devote most of the drill to smoothing out crudities in the defense play of rookies Red McKay and Johnny Mariucci, although he insisted neither of the pair nor goalie Sam Lopresti was responsible for the loss to the Montreal team. Minor penalties proved the undoing of the Hawks and goalie Lopresti against the Canadiens. Detroit, Michigan, January 17th. Johnny Stone, former outfielder for the Detroit Tigers and Washington Senators, has been signed as a scout for the Tigers, owner Walter O. Briggs announced today. Detroit, Michigan, January 17th. Fred L. Mandel, owner of the Detroit Lions professional football team, today announced the appointment of Graham P. Smith of Chicago as vice president and general manager. National Football League club owners ended 2 days of informal discussions in the Blackstone Hotel yesterday without reaching a decision on the announced purpose of the meeting, the selection of a commissioner of professional football. They did, however, arrive at unanimous agreement on a motion to revise the league's constitution and bylaws at the annual meeting in Chicago in April to provide for the office of a commissioner and eliminated the names of a dozen or more candidates for the position. The identity of those remaining in consideration is a closely guarded secret, but owners intimated they expected to narrow the field to one man and have him under contract by the time they gather in April. Beyond admitting that none of the candidates lived in Chicago, the owners were painstakingly noncommittal. It is reported, however, that the present list contains none of the names previously mentioned. A statement at the conclusion of the meeting said the creation of an office of commissioner will not affect the status of the officers of the league. Amplifying the statement, George Marshall, owner of the Washington Redskins, said, "Professional football is expanding to such proportions that the National League no longer can afford to operate on the limited scale necessary back in the days of limited gates, uncertain sponsors, and irregular schedules. Our Constitution, excellent for its purpose at the outset, has become outmoded and cluttered up with conflicting regulations by the addition of amendments through the years. We have agreed to rewrite it almost completely at the April meeting and adapt it to the present conditions, including the Office of Commissioner. In addition to effecting and administering working agreements with these leagues, the commissioner's duties will include the shaping of a more definite plan for the protection and cooperation with college football. Some progress has made in this direction at the draft meeting in Washington last month, when the owners agreed unanimously to adopt a resolution at the April meeting, making it impossible for a player who still has a year of college competition to participate in professional football, even though his class is graduated, unless the athlete can get the permission of his graduate manager and the president of the league. Curly Lambeau of Green Bay, who had called the meeting, arrived yesterday at its conclusion after a 3-day trip from California on 3 airlines and 2 railroads. Saturday night is movie night. Let's see what is playing in the downtown Chicago movie theaters. At the Chicago Estate near Randolph Street, You Shall Have Music, popular music in person. It's Ray Noble and his orchestra and rhythm review. On to Adventure on the screen. It's Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland in the Santa Fe Trail. And Extras, Paramount's most sensational war newsreel. And at the Orientals, Randolph's near State Street, a real star in person. It's Rosemary Lane, Warner Brothers' lovely star of 4 Daughters and other screen hits, plus a star stage show with Franklin D'Amour, Ross and Bennett, Hollywood co-eds, and Ben Barry. And on the screen in its first showing, it's Hullabaloo with Frank Morgan, Virginia Gray, and Billy Burke. And at the State Lake, Hollywood's own all-star roadshow, all in person, it's Lou Holtz, Wendy Berry, Arlene Judge, Lola Lane, Diana Del Rio, Jack Sidney, and Ruth Day. And on the screen in its first loop run, Ocean Floor Mystery, Secret Enemy Invasion, Bases, Girl Spies, The Phantom Submarine with Anita Louise and Bruce Bennett, and an extra, Community Singing. And at the United Artists, Randolph at Dearborn Streets, Exuberant Lovers in its third exciting week. It's Clark Gable and Hedy Lamarr in Comrade X with Felix Bressert, Eve Arden, and Oscar Homolka. And an extra, March on Marines in Technicolor and Disney Color Cartoon and Late World News. And at the Garrick, it's Lou Ayres, Lionel Barrymore, Laura Rain Day, Robert Young in Dr. Kildare's Crisis. And all new, The Mystery of the Whispering Woman, plus shorts. And at the Roosevelt State near Washington Street, Love and Temptation Under the Big Top, it's Henry Fonda, Dorothy Lamour, Linda Darnell, and Chad Hanna in Technicolor. And Screen Scoop, Paramount's most amazing war reel. On the spot shots of Libya, Malta, Sidi Barrani, and London aflame. And at the RKO Palace, Randolph at LaSalle, the smash hit that's got everything. Christopher Morley's daring, intimate, sensational, natural history of a woman. Ginger Rogers and RKO Radio's hit Kitty Foyle with Dennis Morgan, James Craig, Eduardo Cianelli, and Ernest Gossart. Plus co-hit The Saint in Palm Springs with George Sanders. And at the McVickers, Madison near State Street, 2 hits. Betty Davis in The Letter with Herbert Marshall and James Stephenson. And Marlena Dietrich in 7 Sinners with John Wayne. And at the Apollo, 4th solid week of solid laughs, it's Jack Benny and Fred Allen in Love Thy Neighbor. Paramount's Fun Furor with Mary Martin and Rochester. It's radio's famed feud in film. And at the LaSalle, advanced showings, 3 big hits. It's The March of Time, and Too Many Girls with Lucille Ball and Ann Miller, and The Lone Wolf Keeps a Date with Warren William. And at the studio, Van Buren Street at Michigan Avenue, It's Adolf Hitler in After Mein Kampf in its second week and the anonymous cast. And at the Clark, it's Joel McCrea and Lorraine Day, Robert Benchley, and Alfred Hitchcock's thrill spectacle Foreign Correspondent, and Dorothy Lamour in Moon Over Burma. And at the Woods, Randolph and Dearborn Streets, a howling blizzard of belly laughs, Bob Hope, Martha Ray, and Never Say Die. And Joey Brown in Flirting with Fate. And a Laurel and Hardy laugh riot, A Perfect Day, plus the Three Stooges in Three Flat Stoogies. At the Monroe, East of the River, Monroe at Dearborn, John Garfield. East of the River starring John Garfield. The Monroe is at Monroe and Dearborn. So, and also a second hit, Gloria Jean and Hugh Herbert in Little Bit of Heaven. And at the Telenews, the Newsreel Theater stayed at Randolph Streets, the most interesting show in Chicago, 1 hour program of news and shorts. And finally, at the World Playhouse, 410 South Michigan Avenue, today, Chicago premiere, Rex Harrison and Margaret Lockwood in the film that has made the country wild with delight, Night Train, a 20th Century Fox production. Thrilled to a nonstop sensation of romance and excitement. And those are the movies playing in downtown Chicago and the news for Saturday, January 18th, 1941. Henry Chop reporting. Have a swell day.